almost paradoxical. All that it means is that you notice that at this moment you're resisting what is. Noticing it means bringing awareness to the resistance. Awareness implies you're allowing what is to be, even the resistance, because you notice it maybe even as a physical contraction in the body, as an emotional field, and perhaps as thoughts going through your head. You're aware of these, right? Suddenly, oh, I'm resisting this moment. Oh. So you feel it, and so at this moment, this is what is. The mind may want to come in and say, you have failed. You see, you can't do it. It's no use anyway. You might as well give up, become normal again. And resist like everybody else. So when you witness it, that implies you accept that it's there. So in that sense, one could say you're bringing acceptance into non-acceptance. So you could say, I'm angry, upset, this is awful. Okay, and you notice what you feel. There's the upset. That's what is. I'm so unhappy about this thing here, that's right here. I'm so unhappy about it, which is a thought movement accompanied by an emotion. I'm really unhappy, and a little story, because even to say I'm unhappy is the beginning of a little story. I'm so really unhappy about this. Okay. And suddenly you take one step back, and then you watch the mind saying, this is dreadful, I'm unhappy about this, I really feel unhappy with this. Okay, that's what is. You feel unhappy. And the acceptance in this case, if it were put into words, would be, so what? So you're unhappy. Or in other words, I don't mind being unhappy. That's what is. I'm unhappy. So let me be unhappy. You may be surprised to find that when you don't mind being unhappy, unhappiness cannot last very much longer. I'm not talking about indulging in some kind of story, or I'm so unhappy because, no, that means you're believing in some kind of story, and you do mind, because the entire story is based on the fact that you do mind very much. But if you say, I don't mind being unhappy, that's just what is. You're bringing the you don't mind into a story that is based on I do mind. So in that sense, you're bringing acceptance into non-acceptance. And the amazing thing is, if you don't mind being unhappy, you can't be unhappy for that much longer. It's the end of the story, because if you don't mind, what can you do? The story collapses. I live alone and experience an intense loneliness that is extremely painful, almost intolerable. Well, the primary thing is to to look at this on an inner level. The secondary is to look at what one can do on an outer level. But on the inner, the primary, surrender to this moment as it is means letting go of any concept you have about this moment, any interpretation you have about this moment in the head. And that includes the concept of me being alone in the head, of me being lonely, of me not having anybody in my life. And simply be there, not as a person, but as consciousness, as an intense conscious presence. So the pain of loneliness is similar to other kinds of pain or events that are painful. It can actually force you, if you allow it, force you into presence, because being with yourself becomes intolerable. Living with this lonely me becomes intolerable. As part of my unhappiness and depression, I also experienced frequently painful loneliness. And I have a vague memory of what that feels like. Yes, there can be great pain. So allow it to force you into utter and complete presence, so that the concept of me as being lonely, the conceptual identity in the head, I'm a lonely person, I have no one. They all have somebody, other people, they all have someone, says the lonely me. I don't have anyone. So that is no longer what gives you your sense of self. Allow it to dissolve the person. This is what pain can do when it's used rightly, when it's allowed. It dissolves the personal sense of self, and all that remains is presence. It is just this moment, sense perceptions, energy field in the body, and the field of awareness. Just this. And you look around, do things, walk, watch. And then out of that you may find that on an external level, some action may come that you had not thought of before, that hadn't, because you were trapped in a kind of conceptual prison. It's always the same. So you may find yourself stepping out, if that is possible, we don't know. You may find yourself helping other lonely people, talking to other lonely people, pointing out to them certain things. The world is full of them. They're everywhere. There have never been more lonely people than now. Loneliness perhaps is a relatively recent phenomenon even for humanity. In the past, one's identity was very tribal, and if you were expelled from the tribe, you would die. Being expelled from the tribe in most cases meant death. Not just physical, psychologically you would die. And then later on, when there were not tribes anymore but social groups, those lonely outsiders very often were those through whom breakthroughs came into this world because they were forced to go deeper. Those who didn't fit in for one reason or another, those who felt so lonely that they were forced deeper into the vertical dimension within, rather than seeking some kind of solution on the horizontal dimension in more relationships, whatever. So there's great possibility in loneliness. Let's look at the Buddha, and that's just one example. You can take the many artists, writers, people through whom new insights came into this world. They became outsiders, misfits, in a way. The Buddha was lived totally surrounded by his family. Society supported him. And then not through force of circumstance, but through his own decision, he made himself into an outsider. He left. And I'm sure part of his path was also loneliness. And through acceptance, one could say loneliness becomes transformed into solitude. Solitude means being alone, and it's quite beautiful being alone. Loneliness means you're alone and you don't like it. When you can be at ease with being alone, which can only come through surrender and alert presence, then it is quite possible that change happens in your life. And then the words of Jesus come true again. That which you thought you needed for your happiness will be added unto you, including perhaps the relationships, when you don't need them anymore. Helping others can be a wonderful thing, and that may come, but you can't really help others when you're there as an unhappy, lonely person trying to combat your loneliness by helping other lonely people. Maybe a little bit of relief, because you can make conversation, but you're still trapped in that conceptual prison. One more question. It's so wonderful that it's all questions and all answers are the same. My lover has ADD, attention deficit disorder, and his mind continually jumps from one thing to the next with no spaces. This happens even while he is sleeping, which can be disturbing. Do you think it is detrimental to my evolution to be so intimately involved with a mind like this? I have been meditating and working for over 25 years to slow down my mind. That is the irony of life. It says here, to be so intimately involved with a mind like this, and that this is, I'm certain that you're not really having, your true relationship is not with your lover's mind, but with your lover, with the being that is underneath the mind. That's why the love is there, that you feel. I don't believe that you love his or her mind. The mind is there on top of the being as a turbulence, a continuous turbulence. What you love is what's underneath there. So, and it's your love that keeps you there, the love of what is underneath the turbulence. That's why you haven't left yet. So when two humans are together, one human has already touched the stillness or lives in it part of the time or most of the time. The other still most of the time perhaps is identified with mind, has no space, inner space, hasn't found it yet, of course has plenty of inner space as much as anybody else, but hasn't found it. Or is intimately identified with the pain body. It's the love that keeps you there, and for a while it is good to be there, and it may well be that you will draw your lover into space also through your love, which is acceptance and which is the ability to look through what looks like him or her, but is only the mind, or is only the mind plus the pain body. And then after a while, it may happen that space arises in him or her also. If it does not happen, it could happen that you begin to lose your spaciousness in the relationship. You can either go that way, you get drawn back into unconsciousness, or the other gets drawn into consciousness. If no change happens, at some point you would separate. But the fact that there is love means there's a good opportunity that you will meet in the peace and in the space that is there, in him or her also, underneath all that. In a way you have already met there. So stick around for a while, and what is right will emerge out of presence, not through some decision making. It'll come out of the presence that you are. No form persists for very long. The form that this moment takes is beautiful. And of course, like all forms, it's about to dissolve. Next week, all you will have of this, or even tomorrow, or tonight, what's left of this gathering on the level of form will be stored as a memory trace in your mind, and as images, probably digital these days, on your camera. And then you can look at that. You can revive the memory in your mind. Oh, that was nice. Or who knows, you might say, oh, I'm so glad to be back home in my own bed. Or that was nice. I wish I was still there. Or you look already on the computer screen, you look at the pictures you took. And it's become a memory, which of course you can only remember it now. It's always now. And suddenly remember that it's always now. And suddenly remember that the essence of this gathering was that, the fact that it's always now. And that hasn't changed at all. The now hasn't left you at all. The essence of this gathering has never left you, can't leave you. So you don't need to make it into some kind of memory. It's unimportant. The essence of it stays as yourself. Because this whole gathering was about yourself. We said that at the beginning. You had to travel here to be with yourself. That is the irony at the moment of humanity, but that's how it works. And so it is timeless. There's no need to think back. Oh, it was so peaceful there. Where did you feel that peace? How do you know it was peaceful? I felt it inside. Okay. And where is that now? Well, it's gone. I can't feel it anymore. Well, of course you can't feel it with here, because you're talking from here now. Can't feel it. Are you in the body? No, I can't go into the body now. I've got too much on my mind. And then perhaps suddenly you remember not to believe every thought that arises in your mind. And after your mind has said, I can't go to the body, there's too much going on, you suddenly go into the body. Oh. Alertness returns. Suddenly you're aware of your surroundings again. And suddenly the phone rings. And then you remember the gaps and the spaces, and you don't jump to answer it. And as you let it ring, you smile. Will you answer the phone or not? I don't know. In the Stillness Speaks book, it says that every ending is a little death. Whenever a situation comes to an end, because the form of that situation dissolves. And rather than resisting that, allow the form to dissolve. Because the form is never it. And the form is not who you are. Who you are is always hiding underneath the form, or deep inside as the formless essence of this form. And when that dissolves, it's beautiful because the essence shines through even more. So as this gathering dissolves, the essence of this gathering, if you allow the ending to be there, shines through even more. Some people find that when their spiritual teacher dies, although I don't know when this body is going to go, but when their spiritual teacher dies, it's a beautiful thing, because suddenly there's only, where there was the form, there's only an emptiness. And that emptiness is more powerful, a more powerful opening even than the form. And the great teachers leave behind an enormous space in the fabric of existence when they pass away. They leave behind a black hole. I saw that very clearly. Within a space of 2 weeks or so, I was in India, in Tiruvannamalai, at the ashram of Ramana Maharshi, where I watched the pilgrims every evening circumambulate, I think that's the word. It means going around the samadhi, the place, the burial place or whatever of Ramana Maharshi, where they built a stone sculpture as if he were still sitting there, unfortunately. But they get drawn, and they were all going around it. It's quite a large space, hundreds of people walking around and around and around. 2 weeks later, we were in Assisi, where St. Francis lived, and there in the basement of the church, there's his tomb. Also, they had built a similar structure, and there was a continuous stream of people walking around and around and around. And I saw the similarity, and I saw the image of they are walking around the black hole that was left behind, an opening into the formless. They were phenomena that opened up the fabric of phenomenal, physical, sense-perceived existence to make room for the divine to shine through, the formless one life, one consciousness. But ultimately, it's everybody's destiny to be that opening. And so we use the expression that you are becoming transparent to that. And the best way to becoming transparent to that is through surrender. Resistance creates more density in the form. Surrender makes you transparent. So the power of the universe moves through you. You become less as a person, less of a person, and more who you truly are. And it's better to leave that nameless.